Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Free Toaster podcast. I'm your host, Carlos Caro. Today, I'm excited to bring you a chat I recently had with Rakesh Patel, the Executive Vice President of the Experian Marketplace. For those of you not familiar with the marketplace, it got started in 2017, and it's quietly become one of the largest consumer marketplaces in the world for credit cards, personal loans, and auto insurance. In today's episode, we'll cover Experian's vision to become a financial co-pilot for consumers, the scale of their marketplace, the Experian Activate targeting platform, how they innovate with lending partners, and Rakesh's advice for lenders looking to scale. Hope you enjoyed today's pod. Rakesh, good morning. It's so good to see you. It's been a while since you were in DC.
It has. The weather's improved, though, a lot better now than what it was then.
We were just chit-chatting earlier around how I get questions from lenders in the industry about you guys. And what often surprises me when I get the question is the perception in the market is generally you guys as both a marketplace and a bureau.
Mm-hmm.
But your roots in the bureau business are so deep that sometimes I will bump into a lender that just completely loses sight of your marketplace business. So I'd love to start there before we go any deeper into unpacking what you're building at Experian. Can you give us an overview of the marketplace?
Yeah, and I think, Carlos, there's a few ways to go deeper into this. I think it does allow us to talk about what Experian is and then go into sort of why marketplace is so critical to what Experian is doing. And I really want to focus on the consumer services business, which is where I sit. So the consumer services business, it's a very fast-paced, very fun, very dynamic business. And ultimately, when I think about what our ambition and our vision in this business is, it is really to become the consumer's financial co-pilot. We want to help consumers with their everyday finances, anticipating their needs and proactively trying to help consumers address those needs. That's ultimately what our sort of overarching ambition is. As I think about our evolvement and transformation in this business, it has transformed and it continues to transform. You touched on it in your opening. As the market looks at Experian as a brand, they often always go towards the credit bureau side of the house. And I think that's important. That's important because the grassroots of how our consumer services business was built was through the ecosystem of credit. And ultimately, we're now transforming that. We were here to serve a purpose years ago, and that purpose was help consumers gain access to the financial system. We introduced Experian Boost years ago that helped really consumers start to think about how do they contribute to boost their credit instantly. And ultimately what that meant was it enabled us to go further down the path of helping consumers save money. And so when we talk about our ambition and we weave in, well, what is our mission in all of this? It is to empower consumers with the ability to see Experian, look at Experian, and think about Experian as a way that they can help get money back into their pocket. And the way that we term it is enable financial power to all. That is ultimately what our mission is about. So if you sort of unpeel the layers here, you can go into the sort of details of, so what does this business look like? And I think that's important. Again, through the lens of what does our brand look like in market, typically and historically, it's looked like we're a bureau. And so as we sort of peel the layers back a little bit, I want to touch on what does the consumer business really look like? So number one, let's talk about size and scale. We have 80 million plus consumers in our product ecosystem. And what that means is that's 80 million consumers that are fully authenticated, passed our identity checks, and effectively now inside our product ecosystem. That 80 million consumers obviously provides a lot of power for us to really help the entire ecosystem of that consumer base think about their finances, think about what I talked about with our mission and our ambition, and really start to go deeper into what are the need states of those consumers and how do we help them. And so the business itself with 80 million consumers, you think about now those 80 million consumers and the other side of the platform, which is the data side, the bureau side, that's where we start, right? So you think about the B2B side. you've got 80 million consumers on the demand side, then you've got access to this breadth and depth of data that sits on the B2B side. And so when you bring those two together, we are uniquely in a position where we can help significant amounts of consumers around our mission and our vision that we talked about. So the way that we look at it is we're a dual-sided platform. The dual-sided platform means we've got a huge scaled user base, we've got access to supply and inventory on the supply side of the house, and our role is to really bridge those two together. So that really starts to now think about the evolution of marketplace. And where did the marketplace really get born from? So the marketplace business, if I think about it, and I'm gonna step back a little bit and talk about marketplace like as a broad business, and then go deeper into it as we talk about sort of specific verticals that we operate in. So the marketplace business has been sort of in market since 2017, 2018. And we had a very mindful role when we thought about the marketplace business. One, we wanted to start with an incubation mindset. We wanted to make sure that the foundation was set as we think about what a true marketplace business should be as we launch this capability. We started in our grassroots, which was credit cards and personal loans, and then we continued to evolve. And you heard how I talked about what our ambition and vision is, and the evolution of the marketplace follows a very similar trend, which is what are the need states of consumers? What do they really financially need? Where is the demand from consumers, and how does Experian play a role? So, we've morphed from credit cards and personal loans back in 2017, 2018. We now play a role in auto insurance through the acquisition of Gabby that we made a few years ago. I just announced the intent to acquire OwnUp, which is going to be our entry point into the home category around refinancing, HELOC, and net new mortgages. We are starting to uncover really big opportunities into the SMB space. Auto refi from your previous days at Caribou, that's another important area vector for us. But you'll notice that the underpinnings of everything I'm talking about is really around how we think about consumers and how do we think about the month-to-month financial obligations every consumer has, and how does Experian play a role to help them across each one of those obligations that they have. So the marketplace has evolved a lot, as well as the consumer business. But ultimately, what we want to do is continue that transformation of the brand narrative that you started with.
Got it. One thing I want to say again, because I think a lot of the folks listening to the podcast are on the lending side of the business. I'm just going to play this back. You tell me what I'm missing. I'm hearing you have access to 80 million consumers that have verified identity with you all. And then you're able to make recommendations to those users across credit cards, personal loans, auto refi, auto insurance, small business lending. What am I missing?
Yeah, you've touched a lot of them. The way to think about it is we want to have a presence wherever consumers are obligated to have a payment in some way, shape, or form. So the area you didn't touch on was student loans, right? So student loans is an area that we have in the marketplace, albeit it's not an area that we've focused on a lot. You could probably tell from the way you narrated back, there's a lot going on. Yeah. There's also other opportunities, so other areas of focus as well. We talk about things like high yield savings as a good example, right? If you wind back over the last few years, that has been in the macro environment, a significant area where consumers are looking to have compounding interest, right? And every month you're getting money back into your pocket. So we generally try to follow the mindset of where consumers are spending, we need to play a role so we can help optimize whether they're spending in the right way or not.
Got it. And just given the scale of the business and the 80 million users, this business has been running for a long time, or at least that's my sense. But when did it get going? What's the history behind the start of the business?
For the marketplace business or the consumer business?
The marketplace business.
Yeah, so as I said, we actually launched this in 2017. So, in the grand scheme of things, not very long, right? We're coming up to the 10-year anniversary, in 2017. And I remember this because my daughter was born around the same time, 3rd of January. We launched it 3rd of January around that time. And we purposely said that for the first year or two, we're going to incubate. And the focus wasn't on just trying to get mass scale, right? And I'm sure we'll touch on why that's sometimes flawed, right? Scale versus quality versus quantity, right? Those ratios are really, really important in the marketplace business, especially when it comes to funnel optimization and things like that. So, we incubated because we knew that we wanted to build a marketplace that did give us a launch pad into differentiation. It gave us a launch pad into how we actually use the assets that we have across all of Experian. And we wanted to bring on partners that wanted to sort of start the journey with us and ride with us, right? And, the way I look at it is it's like any new startup. We were a startup inside a big organization. There was, blood, sweat, tears, determination, grit to get this business going. And we needed trusted partners that, this is the thing I love about it, right? 10 years later or 9 years later, these partners are still with us. And so we needed that incubation period just to set the foundation, get it right.
Okay. I was at Karma while you were incubating this. So I was there 2016 to 2020. And this didn't get on my radar until probably like 2019.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question. At what point did, we sort of, I think it's probably when we came out of incubation based on that timeline. But I would love to hear from you, like how you thought about it.
I always sat with our partners and I asked them, I was always trying to get a sense for where were we competing for dollars from like a marketer standpoint. And I started hearing Experian Marketplace more as a pattern around that time, 2019, 2020. But it's interesting to know it got started much earlier.
Yeah, no, and it was very intentional the way that we started it and the way that we launched it.
I want to pause here for a second to tell you about one of our sponsors, Spinwheel. They've built an API that streamlines your lending application form with just 2 fields. When a customer shares just their birth date and phone number, they can go grab all the information needed to pre-fill their application form. So regardless of what channel you play in, you know that the higher the application rate goes, the lower your cost of acquisition becomes, and the more media you can buy to generate growth. Additionally, they can give you real-time verified consumer credit data and seamless payment processing, which can help you serve customers beyond the initial application. To see a demo, go to spinwheel.io or check out the link in the show notes. It'll hook you up straight with their head of growth.
One thing you didn't touch on that I often get questions about is your Activate platform.
Yeah.
Can you give us just a few headlines on what role the Activate platform plays within the marketplace?
Yeah, so I think it's been a really important innovation for us. And we've really invested in the Activate platform, and I'll explain for the audience what it is in a second. But it's been a big area of investment for us because we truly know that this is the type of platform that makes a difference in this category, right, in the marketplace environment. So if I take a step back, what is Experian Activate? Experian Activate is a platform where actually from a lender's point of view has 2 big stakeholders. It has the risk managers and it has the marketing managers. And the way to conceptualize it at a really high level is the platform enables risk managers to get access to data across various attributes that are Experian driven, other bureau driven. It enables these risk managers to upload their own custom models, their own custom attributes, and effectively build out eligibility rules that fit within the risk parameters that the lender is looking to underwrite towards. We want to continue to strive and push for as close as you can get to the originations criteria sitting inside the Activate platform. And I'll talk about sort of how we've constructed that. So there's the concept of the risk is taken off the table. But ultimately, the risk managers are really there to define the eligibility, define the risk parameters, define the custom models, the attributes using the various data sets that we've got in there. Part of what the uniqueness of Activate is that because our bureau creates new products and services on a pretty fluid basis, the mindset that we've got is Activate should be a distribution platform for the bureau. And what that means is for lenders who participate in the panel or inside our marketplace, it means that we want to give you an unfair advantage. We want to give you the ability to, play with new assets that we're building on the bureau, deploy them to an audience that's captive, that you can fully control, and use the new data to determine what the outcomes look like from a unit economics perspective, from a profitability perspective, a risk perspective, all of the things that we know risk managers are really hyper-focused on. We want to see if these new attributes give greater insight in terms of long-term value, stickiness, engagement, et cetera, on the back-end side. So that's on the risk side. And then once we've built that eligibility, what we then do is enable campaign management. And that's where the marketing teams really get excited, right? Because they don't have to worry about things like, oh, is this type of consumer in or outside my buy box or anything like that. That's all set. So the campaign managers now have the ability to slice and dice the audience that they want to attract that all fits within the risk manager's thresholds that have already been created. And so ultimately, you've got this really great ecosystem of defining the risk parameters, building campaigns, deploying the campaigns, and then really seeing the profitability and performance of those campaigns as they're deployed into that 80 million captive audience. The one other thing about Activate is what we've done is we've wrapped the whole thing in a analytics suite. And so we're rolling this out right now. We've brought on Sigma Analytics. Sigma Analytics is a really powerful tool that's AI driven that helps our lenders understand what's happening with their campaigns, where are they succeeding, where are the areas of opportunity, and I think in my perspective the most important area, which is where are the gaps. So is there an audience that is not met by a product need, and can we alter the product to be able to fit that audience need? And that's where you start to get from this to this, the harmonization between the demand side and the supply side. And so we're rolling that out right now. It's a really strong, powerful capability. And then the final thing I say about Activate, and this is the most important thing out of everything I've said, is Activate is a fully black box, self-contained environment. It's effectively a platform that we don't get access into. So if a lender is deploying custom models, et cetera, that is inside their containerized environment, that is fully black box to them, and we do not get to see or access any of that information.
That was great, and I'm actually, I hear it, and I know more than most about Activate, just given a lot of my lending clients use Activate. So I've seen it firsthand. I've seen some of the dashboards and the tooling. And the close linkage to the bureau data is what makes it such a powerful platform. You said one thing that really resonated with me, because it's something I see the fintech lending community think about a lot, but I haven't seen too many platforms give the right level of transparency to unlock it. But to your comment on helping your partners find underserved segments that don't have products either at all or don't have the right products. I think the power in the business that you're building is the ability in seeing the entire landscape all at once. So for those 80 million consumers, who's served, who's not served, what options do they have? And I've seen this for the last 10 years. Fintechs have done a really nice job finding white space. Who are these folks that don't have the right lending offer, or the lending offer is too expensive? Like, how do I innovate with cash flow underwriting and with payroll linked underwriting, or with secured lending? There's all these innovations that have been happening, but they never really know how many customers they can reach in marketplaces like yours.
Right.
So I'm really excited to dig into that new tool when it launches.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of points to sort of riff on what you're saying there. I think there's number one, if I think about the marketplace philosophy that we've got, and I know you've heard this a few times before, as we've engaged on various client options. Number one is we want optionality for our user base, right? So this is not a one size fits all type of model. We want to make sure that no matter where a consumer sits on the entire risk spectrum, we want to make sure that those consumers have options. And obviously, as you go higher up the risk spectrum, the options change, and you start to get into sort of the premium reward types of products as you get into prime and super prime. But at the end of the day, the thesis is we need to have options available for consumers and give consumers the empowerment to understand what they're seeing and why they're seeing it. And what does that serve for them in terms of, are you really just ultimately trying to seek credit? Are you trying to maximize rewards or anything in between, right? And we want to make sure that we do have that optionality for consumers. The other couple of things that I want to talk about in terms of the philosophy of the business, we've built this business really on giving consumers trust, transparency, and confidence, right? And if you think about those three things and you talk about sort of, the market dynamics and where the industry is changing towards in terms of, emergence of new fintechs coming up, the nimbleness of some of the fintechs to be able to build product that fit a need and those kind of things, that can't be at the detriment to those three fundamental parts of our pillar of strategy, right? Around trust, confidence, and giving consumers the ability to look at us as a marketplace and say that, okay, what they see, I trust it's right because of who we are. I have confidence that I can apply for the product and get it. And it's relevant to what I'm trying to do as a consumer, right? And so, this is where I've always maintained the balance of endless supply is not the answer. It's the right supply relative to the right demand that we've got in the platform, and that's not an equation that is start and stop. It's a continuous evolution of that equation of we continuously assess consumer demand and need state, look at the supply side and say, where are the gaps and how do we go fill them? And that's where you come into play, right? That's just, my first phone call to you is, hey, Carlos, here's how we're thinking about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I love that. Let's change gears first. I do want to come back to where you're innovating, but just given, the last 12 months have been pretty crazy. I don't know about how it felt from your seat, but what I'm observing, both independently and through some of my clients, is a lot of the publishers out there, call it the traditional publishers like NerdWallet or Bankrate, publishers that source traffic predominantly from Google or SEO, have had a hard time for a number of reasons, but a lot of it is connected to search is just changing, right? People are moving into OpenAI and Anthropic, and they're using LLMs to answer questions where they might have gone to Google before. And that's impacting traditional publishers, I think, significantly based on the data I've seen. And then the other open question I have is when will AI start to change how people shop for financial products? As far as I can tell, that hasn't really changed yet. Consumers are still visiting the sites they've been visiting for the last 10 years and transacting in what I'll call traditional ways. But I'm seeing bets, and I think you guys have placed some bets in distribution through LLMs. So I guess my question, that's backdrop as from your perspective, what are some of the most meaningful changes that have happened in the last 12 months, and how are you adapting the business in response?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot to unpack in that. So let me take a sort of a quick tour of the last 12 months from a marketplace point of view, and then inject in how we're thinking about sort of LLMs and the world of AI and what's happening, and how we're embracing it. So number one, if I take a step back and look at the last 12 months, we've evolved, and I touched on it right at the beginning, we've evolved to become more relevant in multiple categories. Right? We started cards and loans, and we expanded. We expanded because consumer need states are expanding, right? At the end of the day, we don't generally, as people in the industry, put the consumer hat on. We don't put ourselves in the view of we're a consumer. And you think about what you or I have been through in the last 12 months, where it could be potentially, you got a new car that needed financing, you moved house, needed to figure out financing there, you got your son or daughter became 16, started driving, right? All of those things as a consumer, you don't actually think about in terms of us as individuals being consumers. So our evolution over the last 12 months in marketplace has been around breadth and depth of where we play across the marketplace ecosystem. So that's number one. I think that's been a big evolution for us. Number two is making sure that we have the ability to move with the market and the way the market is moving, right? And this is where the LLM concept comes in. This is where AI comes in. And like, let's be honest as well. Like, we've been using AI for a long time in the business, right? You think about sort of AI back in the infancy days of machine learning and data science, those kind of things. Like, those are things that are bread and butter, and we've been doing for a long time in the business. Now, where the evolution is going towards, and you touched on it, is sort of the emergence of LLMs. And the one thing I do know, you look at the weekly average users, the daily average users, I don't even know if monthly average users are right now in this LLM world, right? It has been an explosion of users engaging in these LLM tools that are out there. And you kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, what does that really mean? It means that consumers are using these platforms to find information. And so you think about marketplace and where we want to go. It is really around how do we meet consumers at the point of where they're engaging and at the point of where they're searching and looking for information, and how does Experian fulfill a role there? We launched our Experian value proposition inside of OpenAI a few weeks ago, and that was really to start to showcase that consumers are using these platforms, in this case here, talking about insurance, looking for insurance. We need to play a role there. We do need to play a role in credit cards, personal loans, SMB, home, etc. So those are the things that we are focused on, which is how do we make sure that consumers are served at the right time with the right intent through these platforms. And I think you said it before, right? That the concept of consumers being satisfied with doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clicks to get to an end result of fulfillment and gratification, that model is changing. And we as a industry have also got to think about how we evolve where the consumer mindset is going. And I'll give you a little side story. I'm an Android user.
Me too.
Yeah, okay, so we're a minority, apparently.
I want to give you a virtual fist pump.
Right. Apparently green bubbles and, blue bubbles are important. But I caught my daughter talking to my phone the other day. My daughter is 9. And I've told this story a couple of times, and it just reinforces where the mindset of the youth is. I caught my daughter, and then after she finished talking to my phone, I was like, what were you doing? She was like, I was talking to Gemini. And I was like, okay, why? She was like, well, I wanted to know about an animal in Africa and the habitat that this animal lives in. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then she ended up giving me about a 15-minute spiel on what she had learned through Gemini through the one search of what is the habitat of, X animal, whatever that animal was. And then I was like, why didn't you Google that? And her response was, what is Google? And you kind of sit there and go, wow, like that's a cool little side story. But it also, like, as a 9-year-old, you think about when she's 20, 21, 22, thinking about finances, or even earlier than that, thinking about finances, where's she going to go to find this information?
Totally.
It's her mindset is, I don't know Google, but I know Gemini. So I thought
it's the modern day equivalent of what's radio, what's Telegram, what's all this stuff, right?
I remember the days of going to the encyclopedias to get information, right?
So I have another one for you. I drive my son to school. I don't know. He mostly rides the bus, but let's say once a week. We'll miss the bus, or we want to take a late morning. And I'll turn on the radio. And it's usually a station where, like, he'll recognize something, right? And he'll say, Daddy, I don't like the song. Flip to the next one, or like put this one on. And he has a really hard time. I have a really hard time explaining that on the radio, you just listen to what they give you. There's no choice. There's no buttons. You just take, and it breaks his brain because he's so used to, like, on his tablet, he can pick the video. He can stop at any time. So this
this channel where it just feeds you information and you have no control or no direction is foreign to him. So I think it's when I heard your daughter's story, like that's the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Let's take a quick break in the action here because I'd like to introduce you to our newest sponsor, Fintel Connect. They're an affiliate marketing platform that can help connect you to publishers, influencers, and manage your compliance. I'd love for you to check them out. You can find them at fintelconnect.com, Fintel connect.com, where you can connect directly with their founder and CRO. On the same concept of innovation, when I was at Credit Karma, I was almost always on the hunt for lending partners that would try new things with me, innovative things that were that the incumbents tend to view as risky or uncertain. But I always approached the big banks, but I tended to find the fintechs were a little bit more willing to take risk and to try new things with us. Are there things right now, things you're building or wanting to experiment with, where you're looking for innovation partners in the lending community?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that like innovation isn't a point in time, right? We want to continuously innovate on a sort of day-to-day basis, and some of them are smaller innovations / optimizations, some of them are bigger, right? And I think the area that you're going towards is really around sort of how do we think about innovation, and the term I try to like to use is like co-innovation. So how do we find partners that are willing to co-innovate with us? And it's a little bit of like a give to get model, which is ultimately, we want to give our partners access to audience, but what are we going to get in return for that, right? And the return for me is not necessarily about just the product offering a lender has that anyone can go get anywhere in market. It's about truly something that's unique and differentiated to the 80 million consumers in our base relative to outside of our base. And so, the concept of co-innovation is really important for us. It's fostered into the DNA of everything we do. As I engage with the team, my number one comment always back to the team is, have we spoken to clients about this? Like, have we got their feedback? How would they attack this, right? And so it is just part of how we think as an organization. I think in terms of why that mantra is important to us, we do fundamentally believe, and we touched on it right at the beginning, having a dual-sided platform enables us to try to really co-innovate and innovate with authority in this category, right? So, with the user base that we've got, with a value exchange we want to continue to build with consumers, right? And I talked about a give to get model on the supply side. There's also a give to get model on the consumer side, right? Which is, we've got 17 million consumers with a connected account to Experian. As we continue to grow that, there is an expectation, rightly so, of as consumers give us permission to access transactional data, what's that value exchange for them, right? We want to give consumers the ability to say, okay, because you connected your account, we've got this data. We've worked with partners on the supply side to really say your data plus the data we have at Experian gives you a product that you simply can't find anywhere else. And that is where like the co-innovation with partners are. And so, look, there's a number of things that we're working on right now that we're really starting to now talk to partners about, right? I'll talk to them about it in sort of categories. So I touched on the value exchange with consumer permissioning. So that's one big area. Another big area is really around how do we create products in an environment where things like premium credit cards are highly complex. There's a lot of competition in that space. How do we create a value proposition for consumers that understand of the products that they've got? Are they utilizing it in the best way? Are they maximizing the benefits of the product? And inversely, are they shopping and their behavior of the way they're shopping doesn't align to the products that they have, right? And so that's an area that we're focused on, and we want to make sure that we have the ability to really help consumers demystify how this kind of reward space works, especially through the lens of what is your goal? Because if your goal is to save money and you've got a lot of credit cards that are heavy influence on rewards outcomes. Maybe that's not the right way, right? But in inverse, right, you've got a lot of cashback products or 0% products, but you want to get to Hawaii for free with your family, then we play a role to be able to help you determine how you spend to be able to do that. So those are a couple of examples, Carlos, of like where we're focused on and how we think about innovation as a general
Got
category.
it. Yeah, the consumer permission data, that's interesting. I'll make an assumption. Is that data you plan to make available in Activate for lenders, or I guess how are you thinking about leveraging the consumer permission data? Like I'm trying to put myself in a lender's shoes to see how I can match to that intent.
Yeah, so I think the way to think about it is by having connected account capabilities, what does that do? Well, it does a number of different things. Number one is it enables the boost value proposition at greater scale. What it also means is we're reporting more to the bureau through the self-reported capabilities, which then lenders get through the back end. Number three, it gives us insight into things like cash flow, and you touched on it before. So income, employment verification, ingoings and outcomings, right? So all of those become really meaningful ways for us to help lenders attract the right audience off the platform. And ultimately what we want to do is empower lenders with the right information to make the right decisions. And I touched on Activate as sort of two parts of Activate earlier. I talked about the risk side versus the campaign management side. So you think about it from that point of view of, the risk managers may, the access of what they want is different to potentially what a marketing manager wants. So we're working with partners to figure out, right, well, where do you want that type of information to sit, right? And, on the regulated side, right, obviously there's a big regulatory kind of environment that we have to follow, but on the campaign management side, that is a lot more around targeting, being hyper-focused on personalization, being hyper-focused on relevancy and fit. That's where that type of information plays a bigger role.
Got it. One, I want to go back to LLMs here for a second. You mentioned your release within, I assume it's within ChatGPT. There's like an app. Okay. I'm a little nervous personally that in our corner of the market, consumer lending specifically, that we may lag other industries as far as adoption, for a host of reasons, but a big one being there's a bit of a chicken and an egg problem right now with I think the incumbent lenders are going to have like a risk averse kind of view on how they feel about having a LLM promote their products. And I think there's some real compliance concerns there. You can get in trouble for fair lending and UDAP. There's all sorts of stuff there, right? But if the big offers, the products people are familiar with, the household names aren't being displayed within the LLMs, then that becomes a barrier to adoption for the consumer. So I'm worried the market gets kind of stuck there and we end up lagging 4 or 5 years behind other markets that are more willing to lean in and figure it all out together. Like, do you share that concern? And if not, what do you see kind of unlocking that?
Yeah, so I think this is where Experian does play a unique role in this, right? And I look at it through the lens of like a value chain. All right, you think about a value chain all the way from the start, which is really around fraud, identity, and knowing who the consumer is, all the way through to the end, which is originations, right? And if you think about Experian, take a step back, the big Experian, not consumer services, but Experian as an enterprise, we play a role in each one of those pieces of the value chain, right? And that's either direct with the lenders themselves or through consumer business like us, where we play a role. So if you take that mantra and mindset and you look at how a marketplace like ourselves is really looking at LLMs as a distribution channel, right? And what that ultimately means is we can use the LLMs as a distribution channel without compromising what we do as our bread and butter DNA of compliance, risk, and all of the regulatory frameworks that we have in place to make sure that we are meeting all the needs of our lenders. Those don't really change, right? Because at the end of the day, what we're simply saying is LLMs becomes a distribution model where if Experian Marketplace is sitting within an LLM, all of the things that we do if a consumer comes to Experian.com, those don't change, right? If anything, they get highlighted and get more amplified around like, is this a real person or is it an agent? Is this more sort of fraud coming from an area that we haven't seen before? All of those checks and balances actually get amplified. So the way I look at it is Experian actually plays more of a safer role in this category to help our lending partners step into this category, right? Because at the end of the day, if we can get the traditional banks, the fintechs, the regional banks, the credit unions, you name it, that are in our marketplace, and we can get them comfortable to say that Experian isn't really changing our position of what we do today as a marketplace in terms of all the things I covered. This is now just an exhaust for you to get additional volume with the safe checks and balances in place. And by the way, Experian Activate still plays the role here, right? That now becomes a little bit more of a conversation of, great, what additional checks and balances do we need to put in place versus like we need to reinvent this entire category from a risk compliance mindset. So that is our approach in this category.
Got it. No, I love that. That makes sense. I was hoping we could touch on, and maybe this is just for a future episode if you're willing to. I would have loved to get into your advice for lenders that are either in the platform and want to gain momentum and traction, or for lenders that aren't yet in the marketplace that want to position themselves as attractive to you all as partners. Do you have a quick take on either of those questions before we wrap?
Yeah, I'll try to cover both. Let's go with the latter before the former. So in terms of new, you heard earlier on in terms of what we're trying to do with consumers and meet demand, right? So the way that I think about it is for new partners coming on, and it's actually applicable to existing partners as well, there's three things I focus on. Be the standout product hero, right? What does that product really look like from a perspective of consumer differentiation? And then also don't lose sight of the funnel, right? The funnel plays equally as a critical role as having a really strong value proposition for the product. Number two, invest in the integration in the UX. So Experian Activate is a really good example of where investment needs to happen. Otherwise, candidly speaking, you're playing against a competitive landscape of where you've got extremely high conversion rates and great funnel fulfillment versus low conversion rate and very small funnel fulfillment. You're talking apples and oranges there. So, and consumer experience is really, really important. You and I have had this conversation many times around the more friction we bring into the process, the more fallout we get. The more we ask consumers to do, the more fallout we get. So UX is really, really important in all of this. And then the third one, and I touched on before, you've got to be analytically driven. You've got to use the data, the insights, to turn that into information and knowledge to be able to drive an outcome. So that's, I think that's relative for both parties, right? Actually, as I think about it, existing and net new.
No, it's for anyone that's listened to my podcast, they've heard me ad nauseum on all three of those pillars. So it's validating to hear you don't think I'm crazy.
No.
So that's awesome. Rakesh, thank you for being on the show today. Super generous with your time as always. Appreciate your insights on the marketplace and where it's heading. Hopefully we can connect maybe later this year and check in on how things are going.
Yeah, absolutely. Love being on here. Like I said, we probably could have had 3-hour podcast, but at the end of the day, I really appreciate the time. Really appreciate Carlos, you sort of reaching out and bringing this to life. So, let's talk about how we do more.
All right. Love it. I'll see you, Rakesh.
Thanks, Carlos.
I want to take a quick break in the action here. If you want to support the show, the number one thing you can do is go to thefreetoaster.com and sign up for our newsletter. You're going to get a couple pieces per week of news, information, insights, and podcasts like the one you're listening to right now at the intersection of marketing, lending, and technology. That's our niche. We don't plan to go outside of that. It's the only publication I've seen out there on the internet that dials into this zone. So if you want to support us, sign up and share it in your favorite Slack channel. This is a quick plug here for my marketing agency. It's called New Market Growth. We do nothing but help fintech lenders accelerate their growth in affiliate marketing channels. Our services are both strategic and operational, and And if you want to learn more about how we can help you, find us at newmarketgrowth.com or email me directly at carlos@newmarketgrowth.com.